my youngest daughter. So she was 11 at the time. And we had gone to a baseball game, and we had stayed overnight, and we were coming home. And there was this truck that kind of followed us, pull up beside us, back off, pull up beside us. And partway on our way home, there was some road construction. And it was narrowed down to one lane, and the barricades were cement on one side and then the plastic things on the other. Well, when we got into that narrowing of the road, they came up beside us as we started into that and forced me off the road. And I'm looking over at my daughter, and I look at this other truck, and these two men get out of this truck and come walking towards our pickup. Well, I had a .38 sitting on the console of the truck. And I looked at them, and in just that fast, we're talking milliseconds, the thought came into my head, if you pick up that gun, you have to be committed to pull the trigger or it will be used on you. But then I looked at my daughter, and I'm like, how will you tell her if you let something horrible happen to her, or if she has to witness something horrible happen to you? How are you going to face her with that?
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the WGOAA podcast. My name is Amara Barnes. Wow. I just finished an interview with one of our founding members, and it was not what I expected. When I put her on the calendar to be interviewed, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't stalk her online. I didn't look her up other than to just look back and say, okay, this is when she became a member. This is kind of what I'd like to speak with her about. And this is what she has, has voiced that she has experience with. Well, it turns out, actually, she's running for office in Idaho. She served for 4 years in the House of Representatives, followed by 2 years in the Idaho Senate. And then she retired to work with the Second Amendment Alliance. So she's a staunch advocate for our Second Amendment rights. And now she's realizing that it's time to come out of retirement and go back into the Senate because there's some changes that she feels strongly need to be made. And, if you'd asked me a few years ago, is that something that's super inspiring that I would want to be like? Well, I would have said, that sounds, of course, really inspiring and really cool. And I assumed that she, was like top of her class in debate and was voted most likely to become president of the United States, things like that. But as it turns out, as I went through this interview, she is so much more than someone who is just going to, run for some kind of political office. She is a mom, she's a grandma, but most of all, she cares about her family and their community. And this is how she is making a difference. She saw the way things were going and she didn't like it. And so she has stepped in to actually do something about it. Everyone can do this. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be in office, but if you're not showing up for the school meetings, if you're not showing up to vote, if you're not voicing what it is that you want in the world, no one's going to hear you and no difference is going to be made. And, as we become full-blown adults, which is really weird to be turning 40 this year, but, as you step into adulthood, true adulthood, you realize that it's all one big, huge do-it-yourself project. And our country has been such a dumpster fire lately in terms of, our Second Amendment rights in different states just completely being obliterated. The government stepping all over our rights, stepping all over its people. And you have the radical left that is so loud that if we don't start to speak up and do something about it and actually show up, we're just going to be overrun. And so she's a great example of this. She's a role model that I wish I had when I was younger. And it was a true honor to interview her. So let's go ahead and get to it. I hope you enjoy. All right. And we are recording. Christy Zito. It is lovely to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It sounds like you've had a busy morning and you were testifying to support or to try and get a bill declined.
To try and get a bill stopped. It was Senate Bill 1418. And it's a school carry bill. And there was a good school, well, as good as you're going to get, maybe, school carry bill that came from the House. And it's being held in the Senate at the same State Affairs Committee. And then the chairman of the State Affairs Committee, this was his bill, that it was just such a bad bill that it codified no guns on campus signs. It talked about mandatory ammo and gun choice, that mandatory being done that the school boards would decide what firearm and what ammo you could carry. If you were a teacher who was carrying, there were all this mandatory training. It was just a really bad bill.
How did they spin it to make it seem like it was a good bill?
It's for the kids.
Of course.
You know, and the thing of it is if a person is a bad enough person that they shouldn't be carrying a firearm, they shouldn't be on the street. Because it doesn't matter if it's a gun, a golf club, a baseball bat, an ice pick. It doesn't matter what your weapon of choice or your tool of choice is. That's a better way to say it. When you're going to take another human life, or you're going to do something like shoot up a school and kill a bunch of little kids, it doesn't matter. You shouldn't have a gun anyway. That being said, I don't believe in red flag laws either, because you have not committed a crime until you actually do it. You can think about it, you can talk about it, but until you actually commit that action, because you never know at what point a person might start to do something like that and then not. And our whole entire system of justice is set up so that you are innocent until you are proven guilty.
Oh, we'd like to think so.
In theory, you're right.
Yeah. So, but it was basically just putting a whole bunch of restrictions and outlining exactly what you could and what you couldn't do as far as arming teachers. And I'm in Washington. I'm not real sure about what Idaho's been working on, other than you guys are way better when it comes to Second Amendment laws and protecting our rights in that way. So do you have a lot of schools that are arming their teachers or have armed security, or what's going on in your state?
I think we have 2 schools right now in the state that allow, and they will say that, there are guns on this school. There's a sign right outside that, the guns are there in this school. Beyond that, it's a battle. Our schools become more and more and more liberal all the time.
Right.
We have the National Education Association who push their agenda fully. So it's a struggle. In Idaho, local school boards can still make that decision whether they want to allow guns in the schools or not, or, if they want to have teachers not allow guns in the schools, if they want to be able to have teachers carry. So it's something I would like to see more of.
I would as well. Yeah. And, the left would love to have us be branded like we don't care about kids and that that's dangerous to have guns in your schools. But I completely disagree. We love our kids and we want them to be protected. And so if you're not going to do something about criminals gaining access to your school, then you have to arm someone in your school to take care of them. So I fully support that.
Because the response time is you're in the city, it's 6 minutes. If you're in the country, it can be 45 minutes. And the thing that people miss, and the most important aspect of having teachers armed in the schools, whether they are or not, but the fact that they could, it's a deterrent.
Yes.
Shootings happen in soft target areas. They happen in no gun zones.
Yes, absolutely. Mostly, right?
Over 90% of the time.
Yeah, that's hello. Yeah. And tell me about your position, because you were in office. Tell me about that position and then where you are now, what you're doing.
Okay. I served in the Idaho House of Representatives for 4 years. While I was in there, I was able to carry the legislation that completed Idaho's constitutional carry. It took us from 12 to, I think, 19 to get it done. I worked on it from 16 to 19. And then I served 2 years in the Idaho Senate. Then I retired from the legislature to work for the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance. And then our senator, who got elected when I retired, he needs to go. So I had so many people call me and ask me if I would run. And so I thought, okay, I'll come back out of retirement.
Yeah.
And I'll do this because it's just my opinion that these jobs shouldn't be homesteaded. There are plenty of good people that can serve. You do your time and you move on. But
right. Yeah. So were you always politically inclined as you grew up and, grew into your power and became who you are?
No, not really. Not always. As I look back on it, though, it was funny. When I was a senior, my classmates wanted me to run for county commissioner. But I decided to be a mom. And so I have 5 kids and I have 11 grandkids. And, I did things like I was a room mother and PTA president, and I served on a school board. And that was pretty much the gist of my political career. And I was fine. I would never have guessed ever in a million years that I would ever serve in this building. Farthest thing on my radar ever.
I've heard that a few times from women who are working in not obviously that exact position, but in similar positions where they moved into some kind of political power, and it just shocked them that was something that they could have ever done in the first place, or that they would ever wind up. And that is so what we need right now.
Well, it is, because I'm not here to gain the power. I'm not here to climb, the social structure of internal government. I'm here to serve the people. And it's really hard on people like me. And there are a few of us in this building like that, because we care so much.
Right.
And that's what we're here for, is to be the voice of the people and to protect our constitutional rights. A couple of things that government should do. Spend your tax dollars very, very wisely and judiciously, and protect your rights.
Right.
Beyond that, there is no beyond that.
Right. I agree.
Like the Second Amendment shall not be infringed.
It seems confusing for some people. Somehow. Yeah. So you were testifying today.
Yes.
What does that feel like? What does that do?
Well, it was a committee hearing today. So in Idaho, well, I won't go into the whole process of it, but maybe someday we could do
real simply, what does it look like to testify? Because you don't have to be, holding an office or be involved in politics to testify. It can be anybody. So what does it look like? What does that feel like? Is it scary? What are you expected to do?
Well, for me, it's not scary because I've done it, but I understand the concerns from, when I first got in office. So you sign up. I signed up yesterday online. In Idaho, you can do that. And in Idaho, you can testify online, or you can sign up online to testify in person, or you can show up at the committee hearing and testify in person as well. They ask you who you represent when you sign up, and if you're for or against. And that way the chairman can have equal representation. They'll typically pick on someone who is in favor of the legislation, and then invite someone who's opposed to the legislation to testify. And then when it's your turn, there's a podium that sits in front of the committee chairs. They have a thing they sit behind, kind of like Supreme Court. Only in Idaho, it's kind of in a square thing, or U shape. And then you go up there, you address the chairman and the committee, and then you introduce who you are, who you represent, and then you say what you have to say, and you have 2 minutes to testify. And then when you're done, if the committee would like to ask you questions, then you can answer questions from the committee.
Okay. That sounds doable and also really intimidating.
Oh, well, it can be at first, but the thing that you have to remember when you go to testify is all of those people sitting there, they represent you. They work for you. Your tax dollars are paying them to be there. You voted them in office. And so they should be listening to what you have to say and how you feel about whatever the topic is. And I would encourage people to participate in it. It's good now because you can watch all of these proceedings online. It's all available online, whether it's a committee hearing, whether you want to watch the floor sessions, which, we can't participate in floor sessions. You have to be an elected representative to be in a floor session, but watch and see how it works and see how it happens. Everybody should know, and everybody should take a turn serving in office somewhere.
Yeah, seems like it. So yeah, I guess I have this issue with wondering if what I say and what I do is going to make a difference. And you have all these gun groups that are, asking for your signature, asking you to fill out this letter. They have pre-written letters, and then you can customize it yourself if you want to. And then you can show up and actually testify. And whether you do that in person or online, I'm wondering which aspect makes the most difference. I'm assuming testifying in person would make the most impact. Have you found that to be true?
Well, actually, I think it has some impact, but what makes the most difference to most legislators is the next election. So for example, when we did constitutional carry the first year, we had 6,500 petitions, paper petitions that had been signed, delivered to my office. Okay. The chairman of the State Affairs Committee at that time in the House fought us tooth and toenail. I mean, he made fun of our attorney, Alex Kincaid, who's one of the foremost Second Amendment attorneys. in the country, not just in Idaho. I mean, he gave us all kinds of grief. We had emails going to the Capitol. People were calling him. And this went on for 2 years. And at the end of the second year, that man did not get reelected because the people were done with it. He wasn't listening to them. They wanted full constitutional carry in the state of Idaho. He fought us on it at every opportunity he had. So that's where your power is. People will say, well, my vote doesn't count. I'm not even going to go vote because it doesn't count. Well, if enough of us start to feel that way, the liberals, they're going to go vote.
Yeah, they are.
About that. Mm-hmm. So conservatives, you have got to show up. You've got to make those phone calls. You've got to send those emails. You've got to personal letters to them. The form letters are great too, because then they know people are watching them. But the more personal contact you can have with your representative as well, even if they don't take your phone call, leave a message. If they have a secretary or an attaché, leave a message with them and say, hey, I'm paying attention to what you're doing here. And we want constitutional carry, or we want stand your ground, or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And even though before starting Women Gun Owners Association and before COVID and all that stuff, I was like, my vote doesn't count. I can tell it doesn't count because XYZ. But then COVID happened and not enough people stood up and said, no, this is not okay. Said, no, not okay for my business to be shut down. No, you don't get to dictate to me. No, this is not how we should be handling this. Not enough people stood up and said no, because most of the people that feel that way are the silent majority. We just want to be left alone. We just want to go about our business, and we got completely bulldozed. And so, not to go down the COVID rabbit hole or anything, but the same thing goes for Second Amendment rights and for anything that's really important to you. Your voice really matters, both personally and nationwide. And so if you can get your voice out there and be heard, that's going to actually make a difference. And the more voices that are speaking up, and that's part of what we do, is rallying our women to speak up and say what you want, say what you require of America. And so I really love what you have to say about that. That's great. Anything else you want to add to that part of the day?
Well, I think the grassroots organizations are so important. Like you do, like the Second Amendment Alliance, because you're closer to those representatives. And you know that if you donate or when you sign a petition, it's on a local level. And we don't compromise because we're not here. And as a legislator, I'm not going to compromise your vote on these important issues. And that's so important. And we see some of these bigger, more national organizations now, that they will compromise. And I think part of their agenda, and this is just my own personal opinion, is if we had full Second Amendment, constitutional carry, full rights all across the country, what are some of these organizations going to do? But, the small grassroots, and I hate to keep referring to the Alliance, but that's what I did. And that's who I work with when I'm in the legislature on this legislation. Greg Pruitt, who's the president of it, we will say, what are we going to do when we get all this done? What about our next job? What will be our next issue? Because we want full constitutional carry. We want you to be able to defend yourself and have good stand your ground. We want the Second Amendment to be, shall not be infringed.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Tell me about your first experience with firearms. Were you raised with them? What was that like?
Yes, I was raised with firearms. We didn't have a lot in the house. My dad was a Korean War veteran. He had a shotgun and he had a rifle, and we had, 22. We learned to respect firearms. He didn't do a lot of hunting or anything like that when I was growing up, but they were in the home and we were aware of them. When I became a mom, I'm not sure why it was important to me, but it was important to me that my kids had guns. So, as they were what I considered age appropriate, like at 12, they got a 22. When they got old enough to hunt, they got rifles and such. And so my kids grew up with guns, learning to respect them, learning how to shoot,
You have boys and girls?
Boys and girls. I have 3 boys and 2 girls. I don't know, because I was thinking grandkids at the moment.
Yeah.
And it's the same way with my grandchildren. They're being raised that same way as well. The real turning point for me was my daughter and I had traveled to a baseball game for my youngest son. And there's 10 years between my youngest son and my youngest daughter. So she was 11 at the time. And we had gone to a baseball game and we had stayed overnight and we were coming home. And there was this truck that kind of followed us, it'd pull up beside us, back off, pull up beside us. And partway on our way home, there was some road construction, and it was narrowed down to one lane, and the barricades were cement on one side and then the plastic things on the other. Well, when we got into that narrowing of the road, they came up beside us as we started into that and forced me off the road. And I'm looking over at my daughter, and I look at this other truck, and these two men get out of this truck and come walking towards our pickup. Well, I had a .38 sitting on the console of the truck. And I looked at them, and in just that fast, we're talking milliseconds, the thought came into my head. If you pick up that gun, you have to be committed to pull the trigger or it will be used on you. But then I looked at my daughter, and I'm like, how will you tell her if you let something horrible happen to her, or if she has to witness something horrible happen to you? How are you going to face her with that?
Yeah.
And you can't, it amazes me still how fast all those thoughts come into your head just in the time that these men are taking 3 or 4 steps to get to a truck. So I picked up the gun. I didn't put my finger on the trigger at that moment, but I raised the firearm and held it up so that they could see it plainly. And I must have given them one of those Mama Grizzly Bear looks. Because they looked at me, they looked at the gun, and they turned and got back in their truck, and we didn't see them again. So that's when it came home to me that, that was my equalizer. There was
absolutely. Yeah, they picked the wrong woman. That's amazing.
Well, I couldn't have overcome those two men.
Of course.
There's no way physically I could have. Sure, I could have locked the doors, but they can bust the windows.
Yeah.
But I didn't have to.
And they could see that you were ready to defend yourself and your family. That's so inspiring and must have scared the shit out of you.
When I got done, so my daughter, she didn't really, I looked at her, she's just sitting there looking at me. I don't think, and even if I asked her about it today, I said, do you remember that? And she said, I kind of remember it because I've heard you talk about it. She said, but I don't remember a lot about it. And I'm thinking, thank God.
Right.
That she doesn't, because that means I was successful in protecting her from something horrible.
Definitely. Yeah. Mentally, emotionally, all of that, where she didn't have to be scared in that moment, that she knew she was safe with you. Oh my gosh, Christy, thank you for sharing that. That was amazing.
Well, and that's why when I hear, is Moms Demand Action, when or every town, whatever they call themselves, and they show up and they testify about, well, we don't want this and we don't want guns here and more guns don't do this and more guns don't do that. Right. I'm like, no, they do.
They do.
They do. I'm living proof because I live in an area where there are probably several firearms behind every door. Mm-hmm. We really don't have a crime rate.
Mm-hmm.
Go figure, right?
Right.
And it works. And the statistics show that. This is not just a supposition by some crazy lady with a gun. There are statistics that absolutely prove this.
Right.
All of the gun control that Congress or anybody has ever done, executive order, never helped it. But when people know there's an opportunity that they're going to be met with equal force, it's a deterrent.
Right. Well, and it's super naive. It just shows that none of those women have had an actual experience with a firearm saving their life. Right. Because if they did, their tune would change. Apparently their kids have never been threatened where they really had to defend them or take care of themselves at their home, which I find hard to believe because there's an awful lot of women in that group. But it appears that they have never had actual real world experience with that. Not that I want anyone to have real world experience with that. Of course not. But to know that that's out there and that can happen to you and it can happen on their time. It's not going to be when you want it to. It's not going to be when you're ready. It can just happen.
Right. I would never have guessed that morning. It was a beautiful spring morning, baseball season. We get in the truck and head out and whoa.
Yeah. So before that, you had a .38 in your car. How long had you been carrying a .38 with you? Do you normally carry it on your person? And did you just kind of grow up and you're like some early 20s-year-old girl walking around armed all the time? That's unusual.
Well, and
tell me about it.
The thing about it is prior to that, I hadn't really carried a lot. But because my daughter and I were going to be traveling a lot by ourselves, it was just one of those still small voices that told me, you need to be prepared. Mm-hmm. And it's not like I ran around carrying open or anything like that. I do now. Mm-hmm. I'm always armed now. For example, right now, I'm not to advertise for a brand, but this is the best little thing to carry concealed, like right on your person.
So like a little fanny pack, or is it a purse, or what is it?
Well, they call them a cross carry. You don't have to in your video either, but it's a little cross carry. And like when I got it, my granddaughter, who's 17, she says, "You'll be the coolest grandma in the world if you buy one of those." So I was with her.
I think you already are the coolest grandma in the world. What?
But then after I bought it, I got looking at it. I thought, oh my gosh, that little 380 fits just perfect in there. And then I have a 9 in my other bag. Mm-hmm. And I don't have like a 9 and a 40 and a this and a that. I have the 9, and then I have that small gun that fits in and then I have a 38 revolver by my bed because they don't misfire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Great. And as long as your carry method stays with you all the time, then that can work for you. You get crucified if you talk about, oh my God, I carry my gun in a bag. Everyone just like thinks that you're the worst person ever. And like, that's just silly. Come on.
You can carry open or concealed in Idaho. So, a lot of times if I'm wearing jeans and stuff like that, I'll just carry my 9 open.
Right.
Because I think that it would be important for people to get comfortable, number one, with seeing women carrying. Right. And number two, like I've gone into airports before and had to check my firearm in, to get on the plane. Mm-hmm. And the stewardess and the check-in and the women at the airport, I've almost missed flights before because they wanted to stand there and talk about this. And how did I get comfortable with it? How did I decide what firearm to choose from? Mm-hmm. And, things like that. And I find that for the most part, a lot of women, they don't know they can, for lack of a better way to say it.
Yeah, no kidding. I think I've seen maybe like 1 or 2 women who open carry around here. And we're in Washington, which leans left for at least half the state. But I kind of live a little bit further removed from the Seattle area. And so there are some areas that are more, conservative, more Republican, more pro Second Amendment. And so I would think that I would see more, but you just don't. It's super rare.
Well, women like you can get other women comfortable with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's your mission. That's why we're here.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. What else? So do you feel like most women remain unarmed because it's just too intimidating, or because do you have a theory about that? Because I have my own theories, but what do you think about that?
I think that's a little bit of it. Mm-hmm. And it's just, women in firearms aren't talked about as much as men in firearms. It's kind of like it's a man's world thing. Right. But I think that's changing. I think that the firearms world, they're getting more and more and more that it's important for everyone, but it's equally as important for women. And so I find that like the gun shops and stuff are becoming more and more woman friendly, for lack of a better way to say it, not to diss anybody or anything like that. And then women just in general, I don't think it's anything we ever talked about. I don't remember growing up and even with raising my other children, my older children, we didn't really talk about it. It wasn't an issue that was discussed much, but I think there's a lot of that. It's just sometimes you just don't because you don't think that you can.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. It just doesn't really occur to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're not raised with it, it doesn't really occur to you. It certainly didn't. Well, it occurred to me, in my 20s, I was like, yeah, at some point I'd like to buy a gun, but it was just a fleeting thought, just like, but I don't need one right now. And I'm busy doing other stuff. I'm safe, And I do feel like I was quite naive. I had overinflated confidence like young people do. And so I just didn't think that I needed one. And then it wasn't in my face. I didn't see a whole bunch of role model women that I was looking up to that were carrying and that were talking about it. So that's another part of our mission, is to just start getting women comfortable with it, with talking about it. Because like when I go into a firearm store or at a range or something like that, what I get is either a retired old guy who is doing this for free. He's a volunteer, and it's because he's bored and he just wants to talk about guns, and he's really excited about his thing, but he doesn't know how to talk to women about it. Or you get a woman who's in charge and you get a lecture about gun safety over and over and over, and they just are like a hawk all over you. And it's too much. It's overcompensating. And there needs to be a little bit more relaxation, in my opinion, on our on how we approach firearms. Yes, of course, they can be dangerous if you're not handling them safely. So I'm not saying that that's not important, but the more important aspect is how can we get comfortable with, not treating them like they're nitroglycerin, right? They don't shoot themselves.
Exactly. That's an important point. Yeah. I think just as the normalization of the idea that women will have firearms. Yeah. And just like you said, the more we talk about it, the more we do, and the more we encourage women to go to the shooting range. Another thing that's important to encourage women is when you go to buy a firearm, doesn't matter what your dad says, doesn't matter what your husband says, doesn't matter if you have a boyfriend, what he says, or your brother or anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten was to go into the gun shop. You're going to get a 9 or a 40 or whatever caliber you're going to get. You have like 5 of them laid out on the cabinet. And then you close your eyes and you pick one up without looking at it. And you decide which one feels best, because women will buy the prettiest thing. It's just innate in us. I mean, we buy what we think pretty clothes, pretty shoes, nice handbag. But your firearm is just like your running shoes. You want to buy what fits your hand best. And so I think that was one of the best pieces of advice I ever, everybody thinks, I need to have a 1911 or I need to have this or that. Right. No, you need to have what's going to fit good and feel good in your hand.
Yeah.
And then you go shoot it. You find someplace where you can rent one, lease one, borrow one, whatever, and you go shoot it.
Yeah. I've had a lot of encouragement to get, at least a 9mm. They want you to carry the biggest gun that you can possibly conceal. And I'm a pretty small framed person. And I tell you what, I print like I can't carry a firearm without it showing. It seems like no matter what I do, my values are too small. And so I've had my 9mm, but I'm starting to realize like this is too big to conceal on my body. And so unless I'm going to open carry, then that's great. But if I'm going to conceal it, I'm going to need something smaller. And that may be less comfortable to practice with and fire with. But if you can't actually conceal it, and that is the point of the purchase of your firearm, then it's not meeting your purpose. Right.
Right.
And so I think there's a lot of confusion around that. And a lot of instructors be like, oh, just find out what works for you. Well, you probably don't know what works for you until you start messing with it.
Exactly.
And you might have to get more than one. And there's no problem with that either. I'm all for that.
Shoes we have, typically most women.
Yeah.
Although I know men who have a lot of pairs. I have a friend who has like 75 pairs of shoes, and he's a guy. Hey,
that sounds great. Sure, have a huge closet.
It is. So they're all over the house, but it's important to get what works for you and to know what's going to work for you, and then practice with it.
Yes.
Know how to break it down, know how to clean it, know how to choose what ammo you want for it, because there's more than one kind of ammunition you can put through any given firearm.
Right.
Do you want hollow points? There's just
and
you should know that. And it's kind of fun to learn.
It is really fun to learn. And when I was first getting started, we'll have a lot of beginners that'll watch this, so I want to talk to this. You'll hear the recommendation to clean your gun almost immediately. Oh, learn how to clean your gun. And for me, I was like, why do I need to learn how to clean my gun right now? I just need to know how to hold it. We're starting at the very beginning. But then as you progress through your firearms journey and you're actually learning how to hold it, how to fire it, how to conceal it, all of these things, when you really learn how to take it apart, clean it and put it back together, and you don't need any instructions to do that, all of a sudden it's like light bulbs. I really know how this thing works now. And I really know how to take care of it. And it really becomes your steely little friend. It's just a very empowering moment when you get to that point in your journey.
I like that phrase, your steely little friend. I like that.
Yeah, should go with you everywhere. What brought you to WGOAA in the first place?
I'm trying to think. I think it was the Facebook page. I think that's how it started. And then I went to the website and I'm thinking, these guys, they're doing good things. I think it's good for all the reasons we've just spoken about, that there is a women specific, because women seem to get roped into the other side of the situation. Like we spoke about earlier as well, that, when it comes time to show up and testify against a piece of legislation, it's always, women fill up 4 rows in a committee hearing room with all these red shirts on. And it's always women that have the story about, we don't want our kids hurt. We don't want this. We don't want that.
Right.
And it's just as important to have women on the other side. And so I saw your website, read what you were doing, and I joined.
I love that. Good. Yeah, we've got a lot of traction with the Facebook page, despite the censorship and the constant threats to shut us down and everything. But yeah, so far it's been really well. Gone really well. I could talk. Is there anything that you would like us to accomplish long term to further arming America's women or to serve you as a member?
Well, I'm really happy with how you're serving me as a member and how you're reaching out and what you're doing and what you stand for. As far as long-term goals, I've got a couple of long-term goals that I would like to work on, not just in Idaho, but I'm looking beyond. So I think the suppressor tax and what you have to go through, that's the dumbest thing, because
It's dumb. Yeah.
the suppressor on the end of my gun, that should be an OSHA issue. That protects my hearing. And I would like to see some way, nationally, that we could maybe work or put pressure where we need to get rid of that. And then I seriously would like to see national reciprocity with
Wouldn't
our
that be great?
constitutional carry, because my driver's license works in other states. All kinds of licensing will cross state lines like that.
Right.
I can see no reason why my constitutional carry, why do I have to get a permit to exercise a right? And why does that right have to vary from state to state?
Yeah.
And I would like to work with other, even if I don't get in the legislature, however this shakes out with this election cycle, I would like to work with people from other states to get national reciprocity for constitutional carry.
Yeah, we're going to have to get New York and California on board with that.
Or just ignore them. No, I'm just...
Yeah, or maybe they could just be their own and then everyone else be like, okay, well, you do you. We're going to go about what's right for the country in the middle. And you guys just go be your own country or something. I don't know.
However.
You have a mass exodus. Everyone leaves. Wait, they already did.
But we can't not do it just because we have a couple of states like California and Washington.
Agreed.
We can't say, that'll never work in California. That'll never work in Washington. So why should we even try? No.
Yeah.
It's be done anyway.
Yeah, I agree. Is there a message or something you'd like to say to women in your state or nationwide?
I would just, to all women, be strong, be bold, know who you are. Don't let anyone tell you what you can or cannot do. Set your goals and work hard to achieve them, because, I understand and I honor the difference between men and women. And I'm not a woman who's trying to be in a man's role or trying to take a man's place. But we should honor who we are and just don't let anyone stop you. Just be you and be strong and be bold.
Absolutely. Beautiful. I love that. Any questions for me before we wrap this up, or anything else you'd like to cover?
No, just make sure that I, get my renewal so that I can join. And if there's ever anything that I can do for your organization, please let me know. Please
I
let
appreciate
me know
that.
Help or help you grow or help get your word out.
Okay. I love that. Great.